October always carried a strange kind of silence along the rocky coast of Maine. The small seaside town of Grayhaven sat where the Atlantic Ocean met towering cliffs, hidden from the busy highways and forgotten by most travelers. Fewer than 2,000 people lived there. Everyone knew everyone else. By sunset, the streets emptied, porch lights flickered on, and the only sound left was the crashing surf. But the town's greatest mystery stood alone at the edge of the cliffs. An old lighthouse. Locals simply called it the Never Dark Lighthouse. According to the town's oldest stories, its light had never gone out. Not during hurricanes, not during blackouts, not even after the last lighthouse keeper died more than 40 years ago. No one could explain why. Whenever outsiders asked about it, the townspeople would exchange uneasy glances before quietly saying, "Some mysteries are safer when they stay asleep." Daniel Carter had never believed in ghost stories. A 36-year-old investigative journalist from Boston, he specialized in unsolved disappearances and forgotten cold cases. He trusted evidence, not legends. While researching abandoned coastal towns, Daniel stumbled across a government archive that immediately caught his attention. Over the past 100 years, 17 people had disappeared from Grayhaven. Every single one of them had last been seen somewhere near the lighthouse. None of them had ever been found. No bodies, no suspects, no explanations. For Daniel, it sounded like the perfect investigation. The moment he arrived in Grayhaven, something felt different. People were polite, but distant, almost cautious. At a small grocery store near the harbor, an elderly shopkeeper watched Daniel purchase a town map. "You must be here for the lighthouse," the old man said quietly. Daniel smiled. "I've heard it's famous." The old man's smile disappeared. "If the light flashes 3 times after midnight." He leaned closer. "Don't look out your window." Daniel laughed politely. The old man didn't. That night, rain drifted across the harbor as Daniel sat in his hotel room reviewing old newspaper clippings. Just after midnight, the lighthouse beam swept across the ocean. Then suddenly, it went dark. 1 second later, it returned. A few moments passed. It disappeared again. Then came the 3rd flash. Daniel remembered the warning. His heart beat a little faster. Curiosity won. He stepped toward the window. Far below, standing alone on the shoreline, was a man wearing a long black coat. His face was hidden in the darkness. He wasn't looking at the hotel. He wasn't looking at the sea. He was staring directly at the lighthouse. Then, without making a sound, he slowly vanished into the thick coastal fog. The following morning, Daniel walked to the exact stretch of beach where the stranger had been standing. The tide had washed away nearly every footprint. Almost. Half buried beneath the wet sand was an old silver pocket watch. Its hands had stopped forever at 12:03 a.m. Engraved on the back were 7 chilling words. "If you found this, don't climb the lighthouse." Below the message was a date. October 18th, 1974. Daniel spent the afternoon inside Grayhaven's tiny public library, digging through decades of newspaper archives. Hours later, he found a missing persons article from October 1974. The headline froze him. "Coast Guard officer disappears near lighthouse." The missing man's name was Michael Carter. Daniel stared at the page. Michael Carter was also his grandfather's name. His family had always believed Michael had died during a rescue mission at sea. But according to the official records, He had never been declared dead. Only missing. The investigation had suddenly become personal. That evening, Daniel returned to his hotel. As he unlocked his room, he noticed a plain white envelope resting beneath the door. There was no stamp, no address, no name. Inside was a single, handwritten sentence. Your grandfather reached the top. Don't repeat his mistake. Daniel looked toward the lighthouse, standing silently across the dark ocean. For the first time since arriving in Grayhaven, he realized this wasn't just another unsolved mystery. Somewhere inside that lighthouse, the truth had been waiting for 50 years. And now, it was waiting for him. Daniel barely slept. The anonymous note sat on the small desk beside his bed, its handwritten words refusing to leave his mind. Your grandfather reached the top. Don't repeat his mistake. By sunrise, the fog had swallowed most of Grayhaven's harbor. Fishing boats drifted silently through the mist, their horns echoing across the water like distant warnings. Daniel knew one thing. Someone in this town knew far more than they were willing to admit. His first stop was the Grayhaven Historical Society, a weathered brick building tucked behind the old church. Dust covered nearly every bookshelf, and faded photographs lined the wooden walls. An elderly woman greeted him with a polite smile. I'm Margaret Holloway, she said. I help maintain the town archives. When Daniel mentioned the lighthouse, her expression changed instantly. You should leave that place alone. I've heard that a lot since I arrived. Because everyone who ignored that advice regretted it. Daniel placed the pocket watch on the desk. Margaret stared at it. For several seconds, she said nothing. Finally, she whispered, I never thought I'd see that watch again. Margaret explained that the watch had belonged to Samuel Brooks, the lighthouse keeper who disappeared in 1974. The same night, Daniel's grandfather vanished. Officially, the report claimed Samuel had abandoned his post during a violent storm. But the townspeople believed something else. They believed Samuel never truly left the lighthouse. Margaret unlocked an old storage cabinet and carefully removed a leather-bound journal. The Coast Guard returned his belongings, she said quietly. But nobody could understand these pages. The cover read simply, Keeper's Log, Samuel Brooks. Daniel opened it carefully. Most of the pages described ordinary lighthouse duties, weather conditions, passing ships, maintenance schedules. Then the handwriting began to change. The letters became shaky, uneven, almost frightened. One entry caught Daniel's attention. October 12th, 1974. The light should have gone out tonight. I extinguished it myself. Yet an hour later, it was burning again. Someone climbed the tower after I locked every door. Another entry? October 14th. I heard footsteps above me. There's no floor above the lantern room. Daniel slowly turned another page. October 16th. The radio keeps receiving messages. No voices. Only breathing. The final completed entry was dated October 18th. The same date engraved on the pocket watch. He finally arrived. The man from Boston. He says his name is Michael Carter. He doesn't believe my story. By tomorrow morning, he will. Daniel stopped reading. His grandfather had actually met Samuel Brooks. No one in his family had ever mentioned Grayhaven. Margaret gently closed the journal. There was one page missing when the authorities returned it. What was on it? No one knows. She hesitated before continuing. But an old rumor says Samuel tore it out himself, before climbing to the top of the lighthouse. As Daniel left the Historical Society, heavy clouds rolled across the sky. The lighthouse stood motionless against the grey horizon. It almost seemed to be watching him. That evening, he returned to his hotel. The manager was waiting in the lobby. "You have another delivery." This time, it wasn't an envelope. It was an old brass key. Attached to it was a faded paper tag. Only 3 words were written on it. Lantern Room Door. Daniel looked toward the lighthouse through the rain-covered window. For the first time, he wasn't wondering whether he should go. He was wondering who wanted him to get there first. The brass key felt surprisingly heavy in Daniel Carter's hand. Rain tapped steadily against the hotel window as he turned the faded tag over one more time. Lantern Room Door. Whoever had left it behind knew exactly what he had been searching for. More importantly, they wanted him to keep searching. Grayhaven woke beneath a blanket of grey clouds the following morning. The harbour was unusually quiet. Even the fishermen who normally gathered before sunrise seemed absent. Daniel carried Samuel Brooks's journal in his backpack, slipped the brass key into his jacket pocket, and drove toward the lighthouse. The narrow coastal road twisted along the cliffs before ending at a rusted iron gate. A weathered sign stood beside it. Grayhaven Lighthouse closed by federal order. No public access. The chain securing the gate had long since rusted away. It swung open with little effort. The path leading to the lighthouse was lined with wind-swept grass and broken stone markers, almost hidden beneath years of moss. Daniel noticed something unusual. There were fresh footprints. Someone else had walked this trail recently. The prints led directly to the lighthouse, but none of them returned. He stopped, looked behind him. The sea crashed violently against the cliffs below. There was no one in sight, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. The lighthouse towered above him, its white paint peeling away after decades of salt and storms. Every window was dark. Every door looked abandoned, except one. The heavy metal entrance door stood slightly open, just enough to invite him inside. The air changed the moment Daniel crossed the threshold. Outside, he could hear the wind. Inside, only silence. An unnatural silence. The circular hallway smelled of old wood, sea salt, and machine oil. Dust covered nearly everything. Nearly. A narrow trail across the floor suggested someone had been walking here recently. His flashlight swept across the walls. Old photographs, maps, emergency equipment. Then, another frame caught his attention. It held a faded black and white photograph, dated 1974. Standing beside the lighthouse were 2 men. One was wearing a Coast Guard uniform. The other wore a lighthouse keeper's coat. Daniel's breathing slowed. He recognized one face immediately. His grandfather, Michael Carter, standing beside Samuel Brooks. Neither man looked frightened. In fact, they were smiling. Something wasn't right. His family had always believed Michael had died during a rescue mission. Why had he never told anyone he had come to Grayhaven? And why had every official report hidden that fact? Daniel carefully removed the photograph from its frame. On the back, written in faded pencil, were 6 words. The answers are above the light. A cold breeze drifted through the tower. Daniel froze. There shouldn't have been any wind. Every window was closed. Then he heard it. One slow, heavy footstep above him. He aimed his flashlight toward the spiral staircase. Nothing. Another step, this time closer. He climbed 3 stairs. The sound stopped. Silence returned. Floor after floor, the lighthouse revealed pieces of its forgotten past. Storage rooms, old fuel tanks, rusted gears that had once rotated the great lantern. Everything appeared abandoned. Yet nothing felt empty. Every few minutes, Daniel found another sign that someone had been there before him. A recently moved chair, a fresh candle, a cup containing rainwater that hadn't collected much dust. Someone had been living here, or visiting, very recently. Halfway up the tower, he found a heavy wooden door, unlike the others. It was locked. A small brass plaque read, "Lantern Room." Daniel reached into his pocket. The brass key fit perfectly. For a brief moment, he hesitated. He remembered the warning carved into the pocket watch. Don't climb the lighthouse. He remembered Samuel's journal. The light should have gone out. And the anonymous note. Don't repeat his mistake. Every clue had warned him to stay away. Yet every clue had also led him here. Slowly, he turned the key. The old lock clicked open. Daniel wrapped his hand around the cold iron handle. He took one slow breath, then pushed the door inward. A blast of freezing air rushed from the darkness beyond. His flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then went completely out. And somewhere inside the room, a voice, calm and unmistakably human, broke the silence. It whispered only 3 words. "You're too late." Daniel's flashlight died in his hand. Darkness swallowed the lantern room. Only the steady rhythm of the ocean crashing against the cliffs reminded him that he was still standing inside the lighthouse. Then the voice came again. Calm. Clear. Almost familiar. "You shouldn't have come alone." Daniel's heart pounded. "Who's there?" No answer. Only silence. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a small emergency flashlight, and switched it on. A thin beam of light swept across the room. The lantern chamber was far larger than he had imagined. The enormous Fresnel lens still stood at the center, its crystal panels reflecting faint rays of daylight through the glass walls. Dust covered the floor, but not everywhere. Fresh footprints circled the lantern. Someone had been here only hours earlier. Daniel followed the footprints. They ended beside an old wooden desk hidden beneath a canvas cover. Inside the desk were yellowed maps, weather reports, and dozens of handwritten notes. One drawer refused to open. It had no lock. Instead, something inside seemed to be blocking it. Daniel pulled harder. With a loud crack, the drawer slid open. Inside was a leather folder, wrapped carefully in oilcloth. Across the front were 4 faded words. Confidential. October 1974. His hands trembled as he untied the string. The first document carried the seal of the United States Coast Guard. It listed the names of 4 people assigned to an emergency investigation. Samuel Brooks, Michael Carter, Captain Harold Green, Dr. Evelyn Ross. Daniel frowned. His grandfather had never been a rescue victim. He had been part of an official investigation. Why had his family never known? He turned another page. A typed report described strange events reported by ships passing Grayhaven. Compasses spinning without reason. Radios receiving voices from empty channels. Captains reporting a lighthouse beam appearing miles beyond its normal range. Each incident had occurred shortly after midnight. Every report ended with the same handwritten sentence. Cause remains unknown. At the bottom of the folder lay something even stranger. An old cassette tape. A label written by hand simply read, Interview 4. There was no tape recorder nearby. But Daniel slipped the cassette into his jacket. Whatever was recorded on it might answer questions the documents could not. As he searched the rest of the room, he noticed something unusual about the giant Fresnel lens. One section reflected light differently. He stepped closer. The glass panel wasn't part of the lens. It was a hidden door. Carefully pressing against it, Daniel heard a soft click. The panel swung inward. Behind it was a narrow stone passage spiraling upward. But according to every blueprint he had seen, there was nothing above the lantern room. This passage should not have existed. Cold air drifted down from the darkness. The walls were carved directly into the stone, much older than the lighthouse itself. Someone had built this place long before the lighthouse had ever stood on these cliffs. Daniel climbed slowly. The passage ended at a small circular chamber. There were no windows, only a wooden chair, a rusted radio, and another journal. Unlike Samuel Brooks's journal, this one looked almost new. Daniel opened the first page. His pulse stopped. The handwriting looked painfully familiar. It matched the letters in the anonymous notes. The journal began with a single sentence. "If you are reading this, then I have already disappeared." He turned the page. Signed beneath the first entry was a name he never expected to see. Michael Carter, his grandfather, alive, writing inside the lighthouse after the night everyone believed he had died. Daniel slowly sat down. The truth was finally beginning to surface. But outside, far below the tower, he heard the unmistakable sound of a vehicle stopping near the entrance. A car door slammed, then another. Voices echoed through the empty lighthouse. Someone else had arrived, and they were climbing the stairs. Daniel closed his grandfather's journal the moment he heard footsteps echoing up the spiral staircase. One pair, then another. Whoever had entered the lighthouse wasn't trying to be quiet. They wanted him to know they were coming. Daniel quickly slipped Michael Carter's journal and the cassette tape into his backpack. He switched off his flashlight and remained perfectly still inside the hidden chamber. The footsteps reached the lantern room. A flashlight beam swept across the floor below. Then a man's voice broke the silence. "He's been here," another voice answered. "Search every room." Daniel recognized neither voice. He waited. Minutes passed. The strangers searched every corner of the lighthouse, opening doors, moving furniture, even checking beneath the old machinery. One of them stopped directly beside the hidden glass panel. Daniel held his breath. The man rested his hand on the edge of the Fresnel lens. For a terrifying moment, it seemed he had discovered the concealed entrance. Then a radio crackled from downstairs. "We've got movement outside." The man stepped away. "Forget it, let's go." Their footsteps slowly faded. A vehicle engine started, then disappeared down the coastal road. Only after several minutes of complete silence did Daniel finally climb back into the lantern room. The storm that had been gathering all afternoon finally arrived. Rain slammed against the glass walls of the lighthouse. Thunder rolled across the Atlantic. Daniel couldn't risk driving back to town. He decided to remain inside until morning. Using an old lantern he found in a storage cabinet, he settled beside the desk and opened his grandfather's journal. The first pages described ordinary observations, weather conditions, ship traffic, meetings with Samuel Brooks. But halfway through the journal, everything changed. October 15th, 1974. Samuel was right. The lighthouse isn't producing the light. Something beneath it is. Daniel turned another page. October 16th. We discovered a chamber beneath the cliffs. The lighthouse was built above it, not before it. Someone wanted to hide whatever is down there. Another page. October 17th. Captain Green wants to seal the entrance forever. Dr. Ross believes the phenomenon can be studied. I think they're both wrong. Some doors should never be opened. Daniel stopped reading. There had never been any mention of underground chambers in the official records. Everything connected to this place had been erased. The final written entry was different. The handwriting was hurried, almost desperate. October 18th, 11:41 p.m. If anyone finds this, do not trust the man who calls himself the keeper. He has no reflection. He has no name. And somehow, he never grows old. Daniel stared at the page. A chill ran through his body. The mysterious man on the beach, the anonymous notes, the fresh footprints. Could they all belong to the same person? Lightning flashed outside for just a fraction of a second. The lantern room was illuminated with brilliant white light. Daniel instinctively looked toward the glass windows. A man was standing on the cliff outside. The same long black coat, the same motionless posture, watching the lighthouse, watching him. Another flash of lightning lit the coast. The figure hadn't moved. Daniel rushed downstairs and pushed open the lighthouse door. The rain was freezing. The cliff was empty. No footprints. No sound. No one. He turned back toward the lighthouse, then froze, standing inside the doorway, only a few feet away, was an elderly man wearing a weathered lighthouse keeper's uniform. His silver hair was soaked by the rain, but his face was strangely calm. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then the old man smiled. "I've been waiting for you, Daniel." Daniel's heart nearly stopped. "Who are you?" The old man looked toward the glowing lantern above them before answering. "My name," he paused, "is Samuel Brooks." Daniel stepped backward in disbelief. Samuel Brooks had disappeared more than 50 years ago. According to every official record, he should have been dead. The rain hammered against the lighthouse walls. Daniel stood frozen. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Samuel Brooks had disappeared in 1974. Every official record listed him as missing for more than 50 years. Yet the man standing before him looked no older than 70. His weathered lighthouse keeper's coat was soaked by the rain, but his calm grey eyes never left Daniel's face. "You," Daniel whispered. "That's impossible." Samuel gave a tired smile. "I've been hearing that for half a century." Daniel instinctively stepped back. "If you're really Samuel Brooks, tell me something only you would know." Samuel slowly removed a small brass compass from his pocket. Its glass was cracked. The metal was badly worn. He placed it into Daniel's hand. "Michael gave this back to me on October 17th, 1974. Daniel stared at the compass. His grandfather's initials, MC, were engraved on the back. His family owned countless photographs of Michael Carter. Several showed him carrying that very compass during his Coast Guard service. Daniel looked up. "Where is my grandfather?" Samuel's smile disappeared. "I've spent 52 years asking myself the same question." They moved inside as the storm intensified. Samuel lit an old oil lamp and placed it on the wooden desk. Its warm light filled the lantern room. For the first time, Daniel noticed how exhausted the old keeper looked. Not frightened, not dangerous. Simply tired. Very tired. Samuel opened a faded map of the lighthouse. The structure everyone sees, he pointed to the tower, is only half of it. His finger slid beneath the drawing, far below the cliffs. There is another lighthouse. Daniel frowned. Underground? Samuel nodded. The original one. He explained that long before Grayhaven existed, sailors had spoken of strange lights rising from beneath the sea cliffs. When the modern lighthouse was built in 1881, workers accidentally discovered ancient stone tunnels. The government sealed every entrance. Officially, the tunnels never existed. Unofficially, they became the reason the lighthouse was never abandoned. My grandfather came here because of those tunnels. Samuel nodded again. Michael wasn't sent to rescue anyone. He volunteered. Why? Because someone else had already disappeared. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Who? Samuel hesitated, then answered quietly. My son. Silence filled the room. Daniel had searched every available record before coming to Grayhaven. None had ever mentioned that Samuel Brooks had a family. It's because they erased him, Samuel said softly, almost reading Daniel's thoughts. They erased everyone connected to this place. Samuel walked toward the giant Fresnel lens. He rested one hand against the glass. The government believed whatever existed beneath these cliffs could be contained. They were wrong. They sealed every entrance they could find. But every few years, he looked toward the ocean. Another entrance opens. Daniel remembered his grandfather's journal. The lighthouse isn't producing the light. What exactly is beneath us? He asked. Samuel was silent for a long moment. Finally, he answered. I don't know. I've spent half my life trying to understand it. I've never seen the whole thing. Only its light. Thunder shook the tower. The lantern above them suddenly began to glow. Neither man had touched it. The enormous Fresnel lens slowly came alive with a pale white light. Outside. The beam swept across the Atlantic. The storm seemed to pause. Even the waves looked strangely still. Samuel's face lost all color. It hasn't done that in years. What does it mean? It knows you're here. Before Daniel could ask another question, a loud metallic bang echoed from somewhere below. Then another. Someone was forcing open the main entrance. Samuel grabbed the oil lamp. They found us. Who? Samuel looked directly into Daniel's eyes. The people who buried the truth in 1974. Another crash echoed through the lighthouse, this time followed by voices. Several men, moving quickly. Samuel handed Daniel a small iron key, unlike any he had seen before. If anything happens, his voice became urgent. Go beneath the lighthouse. What about you? Samuel smiled sadly. I've protected this place for 52 years. It's your turn now. Heavy boots thundered up the spiral staircase. A commanding voice shouted from below. Federal agency. Nobody move. Daniel looked toward the stairwell. 3 bright flashlight beams climbed rapidly through the darkness. And behind them, and behind them, and he heard a voice he recognized instantly. A calm, confident voice that sent a chill through his entire body. Daniel, we've been expecting you. It was the same voice that had whispered inside the lantern room days earlier. The same voice that had appeared in his nightmares. But this time, he finally recognized it. It belonged to the man in the old black coat. Daniel recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to the man in the black coat. The same man he had seen standing on the beach. The same voice that had whispered, You're too late. Heavy footsteps echoed up the spiral staircase. Samuel looked at Daniel with quiet urgency. "They've found us." He placed the small iron key into Daniel's hand. "Go?" "What about you?" "I'll slow them down." Daniel hesitated. Samuel nodded toward the hidden passage behind the Fresnel lens. "There isn't much time." The voices grew louder. "Search every room." Daniel slipped through the hidden doorway and hurried down the narrow stone passage. After nearly 50 steps, the staircase ended at a small underground chamber. Unlike the lighthouse above, this place was carved directly into solid rock. At its center stood a heavy iron door. The lock matched the iron key Samuel had given him. Daniel inserted the key. The old mechanism turned with a deep metallic click. Beyond the door was a natural cavern. The air was cold. The sound of dripping water echoed through the darkness. Then Daniel saw it. A narrow stream flowed beneath the cliffs, disappearing into the Atlantic. Beside the water stood an old wooden table, covered in dust. On top of it rested a metal box marked U.S. Coast Guard, Evidence. The seal had never been broken. Daniel carefully opened the box. Inside were only 3 items: a service badge bearing Michael Carter's name, a roll of undeveloped film, and a folded letter. The envelope read, "For my family." His hands trembled as he unfolded it. The letter contained only a few lines. "If you're reading this, I failed to come home. Nothing in Grayhaven is what it seems. Trust Samuel. Never trust the keeper." There was no signature, only Michael Carter's initials. MC. A loud crash echoed through the cavern. Someone had opened the iron door behind him. Flashlights swept across the tunnel. Daniel quickly placed the evidence back into the box and switched off his light. The voices were close. "He's down here. Spread out." Daniel stepped behind a massive stone pillar. He could hear at least 3 people moving through the cavern. Then, silence. One of the flashlights suddenly went out. Another followed. A confused voice whispered, "What happened to the lights?" Before anyone answered. The entire cavern was illuminated by a soft white glow rising from beneath the underground stream. The water itself was glowing. Every person in the cavern froze, including Daniel. Slowly, a single figure emerged from the darkness on the opposite side of the glowing water. It was the man in the black coat. For the first time, Daniel saw his face clearly. He wasn't a stranger. He was the same man smiling beside Samuel Brooks and Michael Carter in the old photograph from 1974. Yet he hadn't aged a single day. The man looked directly at Daniel. Then he smiled. "I was wondering when Michael's grandson would finally find this place." The man in the black coat stood perfectly still across the glowing stream. His face was calm, almost welcoming. Daniel couldn't take his eyes off him. It was the same face from the photograph taken in 1974. The same face. Not a single wrinkle older. Not a single change. Only the years around him had changed. "You know who I am," the man said quietly. Daniel tightened his grip on the evidence box. "I know you've been here since 1974. The man smiled. "Much longer than that." The agents raised their flashlights. One of them shouted, "Step away from him!" The man in the black coat didn't even look at them. Instead, he kept his eyes on Daniel. "Your grandfather came here looking for answers. He found them." "Then where is he?" Daniel demanded. The smile disappeared. He made a choice. Before Daniel could ask another question, a gunshot echoed through the cavern. The bullet struck the rock beside the stranger. Dust filled the air. When it settled, the man was gone. Only the glowing stream remained. The agents rushed forward. There was nowhere he could have escaped. No tunnel, no doorway, nothing. Their leader stepped toward Daniel. "Give me the evidence box." Daniel didn't move. "Who are you?" The man reached into his coat and displayed a federal identification badge. "We've been monitoring this lighthouse for decades. Your grandfather was one of us." Daniel stared at him. "My grandfather never worked for your agency." The agent answered quietly. "Officially, no." Footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them. Samuel appeared, breathing heavily. He looked directly at the agent. "So, you're still hiding the truth?" The agent's expression hardened. "Our job has always been to protect it." Samuel shook his head. "No, your job was to bury it." Silence filled the cavern. Neither man looked surprised to see the other. It was obvious. They had met many years before. Samuel turned to Daniel. "Take the film." Daniel quickly removed the undeveloped film from the evidence box and slipped it into his backpack. The agent noticed immediately. "Stop him." Two officers moved forward. At that exact moment, the white glow beneath the stream suddenly became brighter. The ground trembled. Small stones fell from the cavern ceiling. Everyone instinctively stepped back. Samuel looked toward the water. His face turned pale. "It hasn't awakened like this since 1974. The shaking stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The cavern fell silent once again. Daniel looked across the stream. The man in the black coat had vanished, but something else had appeared. Resting on a flat stone beside the glowing water was an old leather notebook. It hadn't been there a moment earlier. Samuel whispered, "Michael's notebook." Daniel carefully walked forward and picked it up. Inside the cover, written in his grandfather's handwriting, were only 2 sentences. The truth was never hidden inside the lighthouse. It was hidden beneath the town. Daniel slowly looked up. For the first time since arriving in Grayhaven, he realized the lighthouse had never been the final destination. It had only been the beginning. Daniel carefully closed Michael Carter's notebook. Only 2 sentences. Yet they changed everything. The truth was never hidden inside the lighthouse. It was hidden beneath the town. Samuel looked at the notebook and quietly nodded. "I was hoping Michael had left you something." "So, you knew about this?" Daniel asked. Samuel answered honestly. "I knew he was trying to protect the truth. I never knew where he hid it." The federal agents moved closer. Their leader extended his hand. "Mr. Carter, hand over the notebook." Daniel didn't move. Instead, he asked a single question. "Did my grandfather disappear? Or did you make him disappear?" The agent remained silent. That silence told Daniel enough. A loud rumble echoed through the cavern. Dust fell from the ceiling. Samuel looked toward the glowing stream. "We have to leave. Now." Without another word, he led Daniel through a narrow tunnel on the opposite side of the cavern. By the time the agents reached the tunnel entrance, the old passage had partially collapsed, blocking their way. Nearly 10 minutes later, Daniel and Samuel emerged through a hidden stone hatch inside an abandoned warehouse near Grayhaven Harbor. Daniel looked back. From the outside, nothing suggested a tunnel existed beneath the building. Samuel pushed the hatch closed. No one has used this exit in decades. The rain had stopped. Grayhaven was waking to another quiet morning. People walked along Main Street. Children waited for the school bus, and fishermen prepared their boats. Everything looked normal. Yet Daniel now knew that an entire network of forgotten tunnels lay beneath the town, hidden in plain sight, for generations. Samuel pointed toward a red brick building at the end of the street. The original town records are kept there. The courthouse? Samuel shook his head. The old library. It was built before the courthouse, and before anyone knew what was beneath Grayhaven. Daniel opened Michael's notebook again. This time, he noticed something he had missed before. The inside back cover contained a hand-drawn map. Simple. Only a few lines. One mark circled the old library. Beside it, Michael had written just 3 words. "Start here." Daniel smiled for the first time since arriving in Grayhaven. His grandfather had been leaving him clues all along. The lighthouse had revealed the mystery. Now, the town itself held the answers. Together, Daniel and Samuel turned toward the old library. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street. The man in the black coat stood beneath an oak tree. For a brief moment, he tipped his head. The old library stood at the end of Harbour Street. Built of red brick and weathered stone, it had served Grayhaven for more than a century. Daniel followed Samuel through the front door. Inside, everything was quiet. Only the soft ticking of an antique clock echoed through the reading room. Margaret Holloway looked up from her desk. She wasn't surprised to see them. "You found the notebook," she said. Daniel stopped. "You knew it existed?" Margaret nodded. "Michael showed it to me once. He told me that if he never returned, one day his grandson would." Daniel and Samuel exchanged a silent glance. Michael had planned this long before he disappeared. Margaret led them to the library's oldest archive room. Most of the shelves held ordinary town records, birth certificates, property deeds, newspapers. She stopped before a tall wooden bookcase. Without saying a word, she pulled out a single worn history book. A hidden lock clicked. The entire bookshelf slowly moved aside. Behind it was a narrow staircase leading underground. Samuel smiled faintly. I'd forgotten this entrance. At the bottom of the stairs stood a small stone room. Unlike the tunnels beneath the lighthouse, this chamber was dry and carefully maintained. Wooden cabinets lined the walls. Each drawer was labeled with a different year. Margaret walked directly to one marked 1974. Inside was a single file, untouched, waiting. Daniel opened it. The first page was a newspaper article that had never been published. Its headline read, "Coast Guard team discovers secret tunnel system under Grayhaven." Someone had stamped the front page in red ink. Classified, the next document was a handwritten report by Michael Carter. It contained only one important sentence. "The Keeper is not our enemy." Daniel looked up. Then why was he hiding from everyone? Samuel answered quietly. Because people stopped listening. They only feared what they couldn't explain. Daniel turned the final page. Folded inside was an old photograph. It showed Michael, Samuel, and the man in the black coat, standing together. On the back of the photograph, Michael had written, "If you want the truth, ask him why the light never goes out." Daniel carefully slipped the photograph into his pocket. For the first time, he realized they'd been asking the wrong question all along. They had been asking, who is the Keeper? The real question was, what is the light protecting? At that very moment, the library lights suddenly went out. Darkness filled the archive room. From somewhere above, they heard the front door slowly open. Someone had entered the library. The archive room fell silent. Only the sound of slow footsteps echoed through the library above. Daniel switched off his flashlight. Samuel quietly closed the hidden bookshelf. Margaret whispered, "They've found this place." The footsteps stopped. A voice called from upstairs. "Margaret, we know you're here." It was the same federal agent. No anger, no shouting, just confidence. As if he already knew there was nowhere left to hide. Margaret looked at Daniel. There's one thing Michael never showed anyone. She walked to the oldest cabinet in the room. Unlike the others, it had no year written on it. Only a small brass plate. Founders. She unlocked it with a tiny key hanging around her neck. Inside lay a single leather folder. Nothing else. Daniel opened it carefully. There were no government reports, no maps, no photographs. Only one handwritten letter. The signature at the bottom immediately caught his attention. Elias Ward. Daniel frowned. "Who's Elias Ward?" Samuel answered. "He built the lighthouse." The letter was dated 1881. It read, "The light was never built to guide ships. It was built to keep people away from what lies beneath this town. As long as the light burns, the passage remains closed. If the light ever goes dark..." The sentence ended there. The rest of the page had been torn away. Daniel looked up. "So that's why it never goes out." Samuel nodded. For over 100 years, every keeper had only one duty. Keep the light burning. A loud knock shook the bookshelf. Then another. The hidden entrance had been discovered. "We're coming in," the agent called. Samuel turned to Daniel. "Take the letter. They're not after you. They're after this." Daniel folded the letter and slipped it inside Michael's notebook. The bookshelf suddenly slid open. Flashlights flooded the room. The federal agents stepped inside. Their leader looked directly at Daniel. Then, to Daniel's surprise, he lowered his weapon. "I don't want the letter," he said. "I want you to finish what your grandfather started." The room fell silent. Daniel stared at him. "What do you mean?" The agent took a slow breath. Michael Carter wasn't trying to uncover the mystery. He was trying to choose the next keeper. Before anyone could respond, the lighthouse beam swept across the library windows, even though it was nearly noon. Samuel slowly closed his eyes. It has chosen. Every face in the room turned toward Daniel. No one spoke. The lighthouse beam faded from the library windows, and the room fell silent once again. Daniel looked from Samuel to the federal agent. "What do you mean? It has chosen me?" Samuel answered first. "It doesn't choose people by accident." The agent nodded. "Neither did your grandfather." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't come here to become anything. I came here to find Michael Carter." Samuel's expression softened. "And you have." Daniel frowned. "He's gone." Samuel looked directly into his eyes. "No. He left you every answer you needed." Margaret stepped forward and handed Daniel a small envelope that had been hidden inside the leather folder. It was sealed with Michael's report. Daniel carefully opened it. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was unmistakable. His grandfather's. "Daniel, if you are reading this, then you reached the truth. Don't waste your life searching for me. I made my choice many years ago. Someone must always protect the light. Not because it is powerful, but because fear is more dangerous than the truth. If the light is ever used for power instead of protection, everything we sacrificed will have meant nothing." Michael Carter. Daniel slowly folded the letter. For the first time since arriving in Grayhaven, he understood why his grandfather had never returned home. Not because he couldn't, because he chose not to. The federal agent broke the silence. The investigation ends today. He removed a thick file from his coat. Then, without hesitation, he placed it on the table. Everything that was hidden in 1974 will be released. Samuel looked surprised. I never thought I'd see this day. The agent gave a faint smile. Neither did I. Daniel picked up the old brass compass, the same compass Samuel had returned to him. He placed it beside Michael's letter. Then he looked toward the lighthouse, visible through the library window. Its light still turned slowly above the cliffs. Steady, unbroken, just as it had for generations. Samuel walked toward the door. My work here is finished. Daniel stopped him. Will I ever see you again? Samuel smiled. When the light needs a keeper, it always finds one. He stepped outside. The ocean fog rolled across the street. For only a moment, Samuel disappeared behind the mist. When it cleared, he was gone. Weeks later, Daniel published only one story. Not about glowing water, not about hidden tunnels, not about secret agencies. Instead, he wrote about a forgotten coastal town, where ordinary people had quietly protected an extraordinary secret for generations. Some readers believed every word. Others dismissed it as fiction. Daniel didn't try to convince either of them, because some mysteries were never meant to be completely explained, only remembered. Far above the Atlantic, the lighthouse continued its silent watch. Night after night, year after year, its light never failed. And somewhere in the distance, a lone figure in a black coat stood on the cliffs for just a moment before disappearing into the fog. The mystery wasn't over, but Grayhaven was safe. For now. The end. The end.